Welcome back to another informal watch review, a series where I offer my honest thoughts on a watch. Today we'll be looking at the GP Laureato Skeleton, a watch I've been eager to try given the surging interest in the brand. The watch comes courtesy of a good friend who goes by the Wanderist on Instagram, and I've been wearing it non-stop for 2 weeks. Let's get started. The rising demand for GP is an interesting phenomenon. Only a few months back, the brand's watches weren't that desirable and were largely used to bundle for popular Rolex and Patek models at Singapore's authorized dealers. Yet, shelves that were stocked full of GP watches back then are now empty. It's interesting that this has happened despite the double whammy of a cut in discounts and an increase in RRP. Perhaps it's simply demand spilling over from the big brands, whose watches have become unattainable. Or maybe the rising prices and rapidly diminishing stock has made people feel a sense of FOMO. In my opinion, these are both attributing factors to growing demand for GP. But there is an important third factor, which is the simple fact that the brand's watches are really very nice. Take the superbly designed dial of this Laureato Skeleton. There's an inherent sense of flow to the dial layout, with the bridges cradling key components like the small seconds, balance wheel, and barrel. Unlike skeletons such as the Octofinissimo, there isn't so much going on to where your eyes get dizzy. Also, everything looks well thought out, unlike the AP open-worked. With the AP, it's like the designers finished a very nice double balance wheel and then thought, fuck it, who cares? The rest of that dial looks like a mess of black scribbles. Another thing the Laureato Skeleton is great at is providing a clear hierarchy and sense of depth. The different layers of the skeleton are distinguished via the color of the bridges. Even the rotor is designed in a way such that when positioned correctly, it blends with the bridges and looks like it adds another layer. The Laureato is not just an exercise in design either. Instead, there's a lot of substance to this watch, which sports excellent finishing for the price point. For one, the bridges are all radially brushed to create a sunburst effect. There's a fair amount of anglage too, letting the dial play just that bit better with light. I also enjoy small details like the floating GP logo that hangs precariously off the minute track. An especially important thing I want to highlight is that the Laureato Skeleton is still relatively legible compared to other skeletons. This is thanks to large pieces of powerful lume, which look slightly green even in bright conditions. The hands are also well polished and in a much lighter color compared to the bridges. The case and bezel are naturally reminiscent of the Royal Oak's octagonal design, but with some nice touches like the subtle curves of the bezel, which give the watch an even sharper look. Yet, for me, this is where the watch's weaknesses begin. The polished sections of the bezel get dirty very easily and aren't that easy to clean. Also, the radially brushed bezel shows scratches extremely clearly. My issues with the Laureato continue into the bracelet. Similar to the bezel, the large polished center links are very prone to scratches and showing dirt. The design is also not the best. For one, the second center link is much blockier than the first, which makes the watch look less elegant. Next, there are some big gaps between the links as you near the clasp, making the bracelet look flimsy. But most criminally, I get the sense that the finishing of the bracelet is inferior to that of the rest of the watch. It's hard to show on video, but the biggest indicator is that the quality of horizontal brushing on the case is substantially different to that on the bracelet. I feel as if the bracelet has been outsourced to some inferior supplier. Despite my issues with the design and finishing of the bracelet, I have to admit it's at least very light and comfortable. Coupled with the lugs that slope down aggressively, this is perhaps the most comfortable steel sports watch I've worn, aside from my Patek 5711. To sum things up, the GP Laureato Skeleton has a sublime dial, decent case and bezel, and iffy bracelet. At 53,000 Sing dollars, I think it's a very interesting value proposition as a steel sports watch, since there aren't many attainable alternatives in the price range. Personally, at the price, I'd probably buy one just for the dial. Thank you for watching, and please leave a like or subscribe if you would like to see more. The next episode will cover the MB&F LM101.